I've enjoyed his work in Zero Dark 30, Kingsman, 1917, Syriana, and so much more. And now we can all enjoy his work in Spectrum's originals Temple, which started becoming available to all of us eager for this man's work. It started just yesterday, exclusively on Spectrum On Demand. The actor Mark Strong here on The Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Mark?
I'm really well, thanks, Rich, and it's really great to be talking to you.
I really appreciate it. Where am I talking to you from? Where have I found you amidst this crazy world in October of 2020? Where are you right now?
Right now, I'm up in my attic office in London. I've just been filming Temple Season 2, funny enough. We had a filming day today and a very heavy scene, so I've literally come straight from there, straight to the phone, straight to talk to you.
Well, I greatly appreciate that. When you say heavy, what do you mean by heavy scene, Mark? What do you mean by that?
It was the end of an episode scene, and what happens is, without wanting to give too much away, somebody gets trapped in a room, and in trying to shoot their way out, they unfortunately get hit with the ricochet of their own bullet, and I come upon the scene and find something that I'm desperately don't need to find in that moment. So heavy in the sense that it's a really portentous moment right at the end of an episode.
Okay, so what would you say, where does Temple rank for you in terms of heavy? You've been in a lot of heavy stuff. I mean, I just mentioned again Syriana, 1917, Zero Dark 30, for instance. Even, some of the Sherlock Holmes stuff, you play pretty nasty individual. Where does Temple rank for you, Mark Strong?
It ranks right up there, I have to say. I mean, you call those guys bad guys. I think they're just misunderstood,
I like it. I like it a lot. That's great.
Yeah, I think, what's interesting about characters like that is how conflicted they are. I think, first of all, we get a kind of visceral pleasure, don't we, from kind of indulging maybe our bad side. And sometimes we get to play it out through characters that we see on the screen and on the stage. So I kind of enjoy doing that. I also feel like it's quite far removed from me. Obviously I don't go around in my daily life being a bad guy. I think I'm a relatively nice guy, to be honest. But it's kind of cathartic to be able to play those roles on screen. But the thing about them all is, even if they're kind of not liked, if I can make them at least understood, then I feel like I'm shining a light on a type of character which is the sort of person I'm most interested in, which is a combination of good and bad, very conflicted.
So then who's the most misunderstood character you've ever played, Mark Strong? Who's the most misunderstood then, to use your phrase?
Funny you should say that. I think it probably is Daniel Milton right now in Temple, which is why I gravitated to this series, because basically he makes a lot of very dubious choices. He's a surgeon. He's living a very comfortable life. He's a very happy family man, but his wife falls sick. And in an attempt to save her life, he basically finds himself in a situation where he has to make some very odd moral and ethical choices in order to save her life. So he's doing things that might, alienate an ordinary person's sense of what's right, but he's doing it for love. So I think that is as conflicted as you can get.
And then, obviously opening an illegal medical clinic in the Tube, Temple subway station, if you will, in London. It's not like a meth lab or anything like that, but it does sound like Breaking Bad, where Walter White had to make some serious decisions about moral decisions about what he needs to do, and he did it out of affection for his family to try and leave them a better life. It seems like there might be some sort of through lines that we're talking about right here. Mark, would you agree?
There is certainly a similarity in that sense, but I think what happens to Walter White is he actually begins to enjoy his journey over to the dark side. I think the principal difference here with Daniel Milton is that he is dragged kicking and screaming down a path he doesn't want to go down, but because he has to make choices at every turn, in the moment he does the thing that he thinks is for the best, but actually ends up kind of taking a few twists and turns down a path which leads him to a side that he's not happy indulging, if you like. So I think he's not he doesn't enjoy Breaking Bad. He's kind of forced to do things that are just a little bit dodgy, that end up with him crossing the Rubicon, if you like. But like I say, it's all for love. So I feel like on some level, an audience might be able to go with him and his choices.
I've got Mark Strong talking about his new show, Temple, which is, again, started on demand on Spectrum just this very past day, joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. Which sport do you enjoy following? Are you Premier League? Do you like any particular football team over any other? What about your rooting interests, Mark? Do you have one?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's funny you should say that. I am a very big Arsenal fan. Arsenal are, a Premier League soccer team. I was born in Islington in North London, which is where Highbury, the stadium, used to be. And I think when you grow up in the part of the world that I did, you had to make a choice about whether or not you were going to be involved with the football. And I've been a lifelong fan. I've been a season ticket holder for the last 20 years. And I'm not a rabid fan, but I follow their fortunes, and I have to say, if we win on a weekend, I feel pretty good, and if we lose, then I just need a day of being grumpy to get over it.
It makes sense. I totally understand the feeling. It's interesting, Mark, because I called an American football game, an NFL game, in New Tottenham Stadium. And the reason why I bring it up is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are one of the teams that came in and was told that the fact that Tampa Bay's red colors were all over Tottenham Stadium was to the delight of the Arsenal fans, that their colors were inside Tottenham Stadium. And I kind of got a kick out of that, Mark. Yeah,
well, Tottenham are the big Arsenal rivals. The Arsenal-Tottenham rivalry is a very big London rivalry that goes all the way back to the 30s, actually. Not a lot of people know where maybe that rivalry comes from, but basically it was because Arsenal were originally a South London team. They grew up, they were formed and were originally called Woolwich Arsenal, and they were based around the munitions workers who worked in South London. And Tottenham is an area in North London just kind of east of Highbury. And what happened in the 30s was the manager at the time managed to effect a move. So the stadium and the team and the fan base moved from South London up to North London, and Tottenham always felt that they were invading their territory. Unfortunately, that season, Tottenham went down. We stayed up, and I think we've been the most successful team ever since, much to the annoyance of the Tottenham fans. Although, having said that, the last few years, they've been doing really well. And now I think, now with our new manager, Arteta, we're running neck and neck with them again.
Well, I think you might enjoy this story too, Mark Strong, here on the Rich Eisen Show, is that the owner of Arsenal, your football club, is Stan Kroenke, who owns the Los Angeles Rams here in the National Football League. And I mentioned to members of the Rams organization how amazing the new Tottenham Stadium was and how the Rams should play a game there in the new Tottenham Stadium. And I was told essentially over his dead body that they will never do that because of Arsenal. That is what I was told.
Right. Stan and Josh own the team, and he's called Silent Stan. I don't think he gets involved that much with the team, but he has recently just, I think, enabled us to buy a player from Atletico Madrid who's come into our midfield that might be the answer to our problems this season. So I know that he's kind of, as silent as he may be, I think he's just behind the scenes been pulling some strings to enable us to maybe have a good season this season, because we've been struggling a bit the last few years. So our fingers are crossed for this season, and we're hoping to get back into the top 4, which gives us a Champions League place. And that's what we're aiming for this season.
Now, I'll tell you what, I think we can both agree Stan Kroenke's bank account is anything but silent. So I think that that is definitely speaks loudly. So clearly it has for you.
Yeah, he's not short of a few pennies, old Stan.
No, not at all. We're on the Peacock, NBC Sports on Peacock channel. Peacock here in the United States has a ton of Premier League action, so I'd love to get you back on when things begin to get cooking on that front. I'd love to chat with you on that.
I would love that. I mean, we're just at the beginning of our season,
yep.
And we're having kind of a crazy season, I have to say. And I don't know if it's because of the lockdown and all of that, but suddenly a lot of the games are not going the way that they normally do. And we're having kind of loads of games in which there's huge goal scores, which doesn't normally happen. I always felt that perhaps in America, way back, 20, 30, 40 years ago, soccer wasn't popular because there were too many 1-0, 1-1 type score lines. Well, at the moment, we're having like 5-0, 6-1, 4-1. You know, there's some great score lines going on, and something's happening this season. So it'd be great to get together and chat maybe towards the end to see what madness has happened.
I love it, and it's interesting because we're beginning to get used to not having any fans in the stands watching the NFL. Obviously, you've already been through that, and maybe it's just some players are beginning to get comfortable. And
how does that feel? How does that feel, Rich? Do you think that the game is changing because there aren't any fans in the stadium?
Well, I definitely think that there are, as I'm sure the same in Premier League for sure, that there are some stadiums where it is far easier for the away team to stroll into and come up with the win when there aren't crazy fans. You know, there's no chanting really in NFL stands, but I think that is no question something that we're still getting used to here.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think part of the reason that these games are becoming really interesting is because the pressure of the fans is not there. I mean, obviously, if you're in a home game, you want your supporters to be helping your team to victory. But obviously going away is often really heartbreaking because you know that you're not there to support them. But this level playing field where playing at home doesn't have the advantage that it used to have is making things really interesting. And I do remember, actually, when I was filming over in I did a play on Broadway, and I went to see the New York Giants versus the San Francisco 49ers. And the thing that I remember most of all was the movement of the fans, because when you go to a soccer game in the UK, everybody tends to sit quite close together, every seat is full, and you're concentrated on the game. Nobody leaves their seat. Whereas I remember at the NFL game, people were in and out, they were calling out to each other, they were going off to get a drink, they were going off to get some food. The same was true when I was filming in Detroit, and I went to see the Tigers play baseball. I couldn't believe it. It was like a sort of medieval market with people running around selling hot dogs and beer. And in fact, there was one famous guy who kind of almost sang opera. And he was selling his hot dogs with this kind of hot dogs kind of song that he used to do. And I always used to wonder whether the players on the pitch could hear him and whether it put them off. So now I wonder what it must be like to play when there's no fans at all.
Oh, my gosh. There are a couple of venues where fans are allowed in, and I've spoken to players. They hear every word that's being said in their direction. Every last word. Oh, yeah. It can get particularly... You can't have any thin skin. Let's put it that way. You know, when you're hearing the fans...
No, quite.
They're being
I don't know if you ever watch a Premier League game, you know, you sometimes see when a player goes to take a corner or a throw-in at the side of the pitch, you can sometimes see the fans just behind them. And if it's the wrong fans, it sometimes gets a little embarrassing because they get very, very vocal.
I bet. Mark, I really appreciate the call and the time. Before I let you go, I do have a question. I know you were only in it for a brief bit. What was it like shooting 1917? What was that like? Knowing that obviously, I'm sure that there were certain camera tricks, unless it was one whole long scene that you had to get right. What was that like for you, Mark?
It was a revelation. I have to say, it was very unlike the normal process of filming because I had 2 sequences in the film, and I shot those on 2 separate days, a month apart. And every sequence in the film was shot as a continuous sequence. So there are a number of edits in the film. Obviously, the whole thing couldn't be shot in one, but there are a number of edits. But the kind of trickery of modern cinema means it's virtually seamless. But it meant that I turned up, we rehearsed my scene, we did it a few times, then we shot it a few times, and basically once we had it in the can, then that was it. There was no lens changing, there was no close-ups, there was no changing of camera angles or anything. It was just that one thing. And I remember kind of feeling like it was a much quicker process than you normally have on a movie. And I wondered whether it would work. But when I saw the film, I have to say, it blew me away. I just thought the immediacy of the feeling that it's one single shot gives you a real sense of what it might have been like to be there.
It really was, Mark. That film was, to me... I thought it was Best Picture. I really did. And it blew me totally away. and left me wanting more, to be honest with you, which is crazy because it was so harrowing. I wanted to kind of put it aside, and I just wanted to ask you about, because I'm such a, an aficionado of the way films are made, and it seemed to me so special. I was just wondering what it was like to act in it.
Well, it was a little like doing a series of mini plays, because obviously normally you have scenes in a normal film or television show that are, a couple of pages long, whereas this would be 5 or 6 pages. So you'd be doing, 6, 7, 8-minute sequences. And basically, if you come from the theatre, which I did, and most of the actors in that film did, it really isn't. It isn't that difficult to play those as continuous scenes. What it did mean, however, if, for example, like in one of the scenes I did, there were a bunch of guys moving a tree in the background, if one of those guys fell over or dropped a rifle or, perhaps the truck that we got into didn't start, then we had to start the whole sequence again from the beginning. And I remember Andrew Scott, who's a lovely actor, has a sequence where he has to open a letter, read a letter, and at the same time he has to light a cigarette. And he had to do something like 40 takes because the lighter, he'd get to the point where he had to light the cigarette and the lighter wouldn't work. So you had to have a lot of patience doing it. But once you got the scene shot, it was like doing a series of mini plays.
Mark, it's been a terrific conversation. I appreciate the time. I'm a fan of your work. Check out Temple. The 8-part series is available now exclusively on Spectrum On Demand. And speaking of medieval circus that he mentioned, one of the co-stars is Carice Van Houten, who is Melisandre from Game of Thrones. So there's a fascinating cast and a great show, and I look forward to seeing more in our next chat. Mark, thanks for the time.
That's really kind of you, Rich. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it. It's Mark Strong here on The Rich Eisen Show. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.